The night sky over Earth's central command station was calm, but inside the great steel structure, tension grew with every passing second. Rows of officers worked at glowing screens, their hands moving quickly as they scanned for signals from deep space. Most of these signals were routine trade updates, exploration reports, and minor border alerts. But tonight, one signal was different. It was sharp, urgent, and carried a tone that froze the room. Admiral Ross was standing near the central display when the sound came through. A harsh burst of static filled the speakers, followed by a shaky voice. "This is Vendra Colony. We are under attack. Shields failing. Any allied force, please respond." The words were broken by static, but the meaning was clear. Someone far from Earth needed help, and they needed it now. A map lit up on the main screen, showing Vendra's location in the Orion sector. It was a small colony, not rich in resources, but it had been a loyal partner to Earth for decades. The Earth Pact, an old alliance agreement, promised that no member world would be left undefended if attacked. Ross's jaw tightened. He knew what this meant. To answer this call would mean moving the fleet into hostile space, and possibly into war with whoever had attacked Vendra. He turned to his communications officer. "How long has this been broadcasting?" The officer checked his console. "First transmission was 30 minutes ago, sir. It's been repeating since." "The message is weakening. If their defense grid is down, they may not be able to send much longer." Ross looked back at the screen. The map showed the long stretch of space between Earth and Vendra. It would take normal ships weeks to reach them, but Earth's Armada was no normal fleet. Over the past 50 years, human engineering had pushed faster than light travel beyond the limits other civilizations thought possible. The Armada could be there in just a few days. Still, speed was not the only factor. They needed force, and they needed enough of it to make a statement. If this was an organized invasion, arriving with a small rescue group would only invite disaster. Ross knew Earth's history in the galaxy. They were called Deathworlders, not because they sought war, but because they came from a world where surviving every day meant facing danger, high gravity, dangerous predators. Harsh climates Earth had shaped its people to endure, adapt, and fight if necessary. The title was not one humans had chosen, but it was one they had learned to use. Ross gave the order, "Alert the Armada. All available ships to combat readiness. We move for Vendra immediately." The room came alive. Officers relayed orders to shipyards and orbital docks. Pilots were called from their quarters. Engineers began emergency checks on weapons systems, and cargo crews loaded medical supplies. Far above the planet, the dark silhouettes of Earth's warships lit up as power surged through their massive engines. Ross stepped into the strategy chamber, a small room lined with three-dimensional projectors. His senior staff was already their veteran captains, tactical analysts, and fleet coordinators. A detailed scan of Vendra appeared in the air, along with incomplete images of the enemy ships that had been detected by deep space sensors. The scans were grainy, but the shape of the vessels was familiar. Tall, blade-like hulls, sharp spines along the sides, and heavy energy emitters. Ross recognized them at once. Core Dominion. The room went quiet. The Core were not pirates or raiders. They were an empire built on conquest. They struck without warning, crushed resistance quickly, and stripped captured worlds of anything valuable. Most galactic nations feared them and avoided conflict at all costs. The Core's fleets were large, disciplined, and well-armed. But they had one weakness: they believed their power made them untouchable. They believed no one would dare to face them directly. Ross looked around at his officers. They think Vendra is undefended. They think Earth will hesitate. They are wrong. The plan formed quickly. A full strike group would lead the approach, with carrier groups following to deploy fighters. Heavy cruisers would protect the carriers while destroyers moved ahead to break enemy lines. Medical and supply ships would remain in the rear, ready to land on Vendra as soon as the skies were clear. Hours later, the Armada began to move. From the dark side of Earth's moon, long rows of ships slid into open space. Each one was different: sleek interceptors, massive battleships, and towering carriers that could hold entire wings of starfighters. The hum of their engines became a deep, steady roar as they formed into a massive arrow-shaped formation inside the flagship. The Iron Resolve, Ross stood on the command bridge. Through the great viewing glass, he watched Earth grow smaller as the fleet accelerated. Blue lights from the ship's control panels reflected off the steel walls, and the low vibration of the engines filled the air. Navigation, Ross said. Plot the fastest jump to the Orion sector. We cannot afford delays. Aye, Admiral. The navigator replied, first jump in 2 minutes. The ship's intercom carried Ross's voice to every crew member across the Armada. This is Admiral Ross. Our destination is Vendra Colony. They are under attack by the Core Dominion. We go to their aid not because they are strong, but because they are our allies. We do not leave our own to fall. Remember your training. Watch your crew. And remember Earth stands with you. A deep cheer echoed through the fleet. The words carried a simple truth on Earth. Loyalty was not a slogan. It was survival. Humanity had learned long ago that facing danger alone meant certain defeat. But together, they could overcome anything. The final countdown began. One by one, the great ships activated their jump drives. The space outside the viewing glass twisted, stars stretching into long silver lines. Then, with a burst of light, the Armada disappeared into faster-than-light travel. In the silence that followed, Ross stood with his hands behind his back, staring into the shifting patterns of hyperspace. He thought about the people of Vendra farmers, miners, traders, none of them built for war. Right now, they were hiding in shelters, wondering if anyone was coming. They did not know that an entire armada was on the way, and when it arrived, the galaxy would remember the day Earth answered the call. The Armada traveled through the twisting currents of hyperspace, the hum of the engine steady and deep. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, Admiral Ross stood at the center platform, watching the shifting colors outside the viewing glass. Time felt strange in this place between stars, but the fleet's course was exact. They would arrive in Vendra's sector in just over 2 days, across the galaxy. Deep space probes were already racing ahead of them. These small machines were faster than any crewed vessel, and their only job was to gather intelligence and transmit it back to the fleet. If the enemy was still there, Ross wanted every possible detail before they arrived. The first images came in only hours later. Officers gathered around the main display as the projection flickered to life. The scene was grim. Vendra's once clear skies were now darkened by the shadow of warships. Dozens of large vessels circled the planet, their black and silver hulls reflecting the light of the nearby sun. Smaller escort craft darted between them, like predators guarding a kill. The probes zoomed in on one of the largest ships. Its design was sharp and aggressive. The hull shaped like the blade of a giant axe, spikes jutted out along the sides, each one an emitter for heavy plasma beams. Thick armor plates overlapped in layers, designed to absorb direct hits. The hull markings confirmed what Ross had suspected: the Core Dominion. A quiet murmur passed through the bridge crew. Everyone knew the Core's reputation. They were not traders or explorers. They were conquerors. They moved from world to world, taking whatever resources they wanted and forcing the population into their control. Entire civilizations had fallen to their fleets, and now they were here. The next images showed the planet's surface. Vendra's cities were still intact, but the defense grid was gone, without its shield generators. The planet was vulnerable to orbital strikes. The core had not fired yet, but their presence was like a heavy blade hanging over the colony. Ross studied the movements of the core ships. They were maintaining a slow rotation around the planet, staying just far enough apart to cover all angles. Their formation was tight, leaving no clear path for a rescue ship to slip through unnoticed. It was a well-executed blockade, the kind the Corps used when they wanted to force surrender without destroying their prize. "They're waiting," Ross said quietly. "They want Vendra to give up without a fight." Captain Mara, commander of the Steel Horizon, stepped closer to the display. "That means they're not ready for us. They're prepared for a weak relief force, maybe a few frigates, not an entire armada." Ross gave a small nod. "And that is why we will hit them with everything." The fleet's tactical planners got to work. overlaying the probe data onto a full 3D model of the battlefield. Each core ship was marked in red, and Vendra was highlighted in blue at the center. They mapped possible entry points, calculated firing ranges, and ran simulations of different attack angles. But the enemy ships were not the only concern. The Corps were known for deploying strike craft in massive swarms. These smaller fighters could overwhelm unprepared ships. Earth's Armada would need to send out its own fighter wings quickly, before the Corps could control the skies. Meanwhile, in the crew quarters of the Iron Resolve, pilots were suiting up. Flight Commander Rion inspected his squadron's gear. The pilots checked their helmets, secured their harnesses, and tested their weapons systems. The mood was focused, but beneath it, a quiet energy ran through them. Most of these pilots had faced danger before, but this mission carried something different. It was about protecting those who could not protect themselves. Rion spoke to them before dismissing them. Remember, we're not here to destroy everything in sight. We're here to keep the enemy away from our people on the ground. Stay sharp, cover your wingmate, and if you see one of our ships in trouble, you move to help. No one gets left behind. Back on the bridge, Ross listened to the reports coming in from the rest of the Armada. Fuel levels were optimal. Weapon arrays fully charged, shields calibrated. Medical ships had prepared their bays for incoming wounded. Every ship in the fleet was ready. Still, Ross could not ignore the thought that lingered in his mind. The Corps had faced resistance before, but rarely had it been from humans. Other civilizations had always described humans with a mix of fear and respect. Deathworlders, they called them, because Earth was one of the most dangerous inhabited planets in the known galaxy. The people who survived there learned to endure storms, hunt predators, and adapt to constant change in battle. Those instincts turned into something the galaxy had learned not to provoke, and yet, the Corps had provoked it. Hours later, another transmission came from Vendra, weaker than the first. This time, the image was of Governor Hale, the colony's leader. His uniform was torn, his voice hoarse. To any who can hear us, we are holding, but supplies are nearly gone. The Corps demands surrender. We have refused. We will hold. As long as we can, please hurry. The transmission ended abruptly, the signal cut by interference. The bridge crew exchanged grim looks. Ross stepped forward and addressed the communications officer. Patch me through to the whole fleet. A chime sounded as his voice reached every ship in the Armada. We have confirmation. Vendra is still holding. They have refused surrender. That means they are counting on us. The Corps think this world is theirs to take. They are wrong. We will arrive in 39 hours. When we get there, we strike fast, we strike hard, and we do not stop until the skies are clear. The fleet answered with a steady beat of acknowledgement signals across dozens of ships. Crews doubled their preparations, weapons officers fine-tuned targeting systems, engineers reinforced shield generators, and medics ready for incoming patients. In the quiet hours that followed, hyperspace stretched endlessly outside the viewing glass. Some crew members rested, others worked through checklists for the 10th time. In the tactical chamber, Ross and his senior officers refined the battle plan. They would not approach from a single direction. Instead, the fleet would split into 3 wings before arrival, forcing the Corps to divide their attention. The main strike group, led by the Iron Resolve, would draw the enemy's focus. At the same time, flanking wings would cut through the blockade from both sides. Targeting command ships first, fighter squadrons would launch immediately upon entry, creating chaos in the enemy formation. Once the blockade broke, supply and medical ships would move in under escort. It was a plan that required perfect timing. But Ross trusted his people. Trust was something Earth's military had learned long ago. It was built not on blind loyalty, but on knowing the person next to you would act when it mattered. As the hours passed, the sense of anticipation grew. Somewhere ahead, beyond the shifting colors of hyperspace, the Corps Dominion waited, unaware of the storm that was about to fall on them. And when the storm came, it would not come quietly. The final hours before battle were never quiet in Earth's Armada. On every deck of every ship, the air was alive with motion. The soft hum of the engines mixed with the sound of boots on metal floors. Voices called orders, machinery clanked, and status reports echoed through the corridors. Even the newest recruits could feel the weight of what was coming. On the flagship Iron Resolve, Admiral Ross stood in the center of the bridge. He scanned the tactical display as streams of data floated from the fleet's wings. The Armada was almost ready to split into its 3 attack groups. The timing had to be exact. In hyperspace, one small miscalculation could throw the entire plan into chaos. Ross turned to Captain Mara. "How are the ships holding? Shields are fully charged." "Weapons at maximum readiness," Mara replied. "Engineers report all systems stable. Crews are at full combat stations." Ross gave a small nod. "Good. Once we drop out of hyperspace, everything will happen fast. I want every captain ready to act without waiting for a second order." In the launch bays, fighter pilots prepared for immediate deployment. The hangar was a giant space filled with rows of sleek starfighters. Mechanics worked under the wings, securing panels and checking fuel lines. Weapon technicians loaded racks of missiles while energy cells glowed faintly as they charged. The scent of coolant and machine oil filled the air. Flight Commander Rian walked between the fighters, his helmet tucked under one arm. He stopped beside one of his pilots, a young man named Jace who had never flown in a battle of this scale. First time in a major fleet. "Action?" Rian asked. "Yes, sir," Jace replied, trying to sound calm. "Remember this," Rian said firmly. "Stay with your wing. Follow orders. Protect each other. The Corps are dangerous, but they're not unstoppable. Trust your training. Trust your team, and you'll make it back." Elsewhere in the fleet, medical crews prepared their bays. Rows of beds were lined with clean sheets, and carts of medical equipment stood ready. Portable shield emitters were set up to protect the wounded. In case the ships took hits during the fight, doctors and medics moved quickly, their expressions focused. They knew that once the battle began, injured crew members could start arriving. Within minutes, in the supply sections, crates of ammunition were stacked and secured. Energy cells for railguns, fuel for fighters, and food for crews were loaded into place. The Armada carried enough supplies to stay in combat for days if necessary. Ross left the bridge briefly to walk through the main decks. He believed a commander should be seen before a battle. Crew members saluted as he passed, their faces showing determination. He stopped once or twice to speak to them, offering short words of encouragement. "You've trained for this," he told one engineer, tightening a panel on a power conduit. "Trust your work. The fleet depends on it." By the time Ross returned to the bridge, the countdown to their arrival had begun. They were only minutes away from the Orion sector. The 3 attack wings would soon split. The Iron Resolve would lead the central force directly toward the heaviest concentration of core ships. The left and right wings would emerge at different points, aiming to hit the blockade from the flanks. "Navigation," Ross ordered. "Signal all wings to prepare for separation." A moment later, confirmation lights blinked green on the central display. Across the fleet, ships shifted position in the hyperspace stream. The formation stretched and bent, ready to break into 3 distinct paths. 10 seconds to separation, the navigator announced. At the exact mark, the 3 wings split cleanly, each taking its own hyperspace corridor. The Iron Resolve stayed with the central group, made up of the heaviest battleships and carriers. The other wings vanished into their own shimmering lanes, invisible to the naked eye. Ross watched the tactical display as the clock ticked down to the final drop into real space. Every instinct told him that the next minutes would decide not just Vendra's fate, but Earth's place in the galaxy. If they failed here, the Corps would see humanity as weak. But if they succeeded, the message would be clear. Earth defended its allies without hesitation. "Prepare for reversion to normal space," the navigator called. On the hangar decks, pilots strapped into their cockpits. The fighter bays hummed as magnetic clamps held the small craft in place. The moment the fleet arrived, those clamps would release, and the fighters would launch into the dark. In the gunnery stations, crews adjusted targeting sensors and primed heavy cannons, the railguns. Long barrels that could fire solid slugs at near light speed glowed faintly with charging energy. Plasma turrets rotated into position. Missile racks unlocked with a metallic click. The star snapped back into view as the Iron Resolve and its wing emerged from hyperspace. The change was sudden. One moment the swirling light of hyperspace. The next the deep black of normal space filled with countless points of starlight. And ahead of them, Vendra hung in the void, its oceans glinting in the light of its sun. But between the planet and the fleet lay the core Dominion. Their blockade was even larger than the probe images had shown. Warships filled the space in a tight web, their spine hulls bristling with weapon arrays. At the center of the formation loomed a massive flagship, easily twice the size of the Iron Resolve. "They see us," Captain Mara said. Her voice steady. Ross did not look away from the display. "Good. Let them." A moment later, the enemy ships shifted formation. The core moved with precision, their blockade tightening in response to the sudden arrival of Earth's fleet. Beams of scanning energy swept across the human ships, measuring their strength. The core would know soon enough that this was no small rescue attempt. "Signal to all ships," Ross ordered. "Hold position until the flanks are in place. Fighters prepare for launch in the hangars." Clamps released one by one. Fighter engines roared to life, filling the bays with a deep vibration. Pilots gripped their controls, waiting for the launch signal. On the display, the small icons appeared on either side of the core formation. The flanking wings had arrived. The trap was closing. Ross took a deep breath. All ships, advance, fighters, launch. The Armada surged forward, engines flaring bright in the hangars. Fighters shot out into the void in tight formations, railguns and plasma cannons charged, ready to fire. The core fleet began to move as well, their own fighters spilling from hangar bays like a swarm of black insects. The battle for Vendra was about to begin. The moment the three wings of Earth's Armada closed in around Vendra, the blackness of space lit up with movement. The planet turned slowly below, its blue oceans and green continents still untouched by fire. But the air above it shimmered with the threat of battle. The core Dominion's blockade adjusted instantly, its ships turning in near-perfect unison to face the incoming threat. From the bridge of the Iron Resolve, Admiral Ross studied the shifting red icons on the tactical display. His eyes moved from one cluster to another, tracking the core response. Their central ships tightened formation around the flagship, while their outer lines spread to intercept the flanking wings. "They're committing their outer fleet to both sides," Captain Mara said, leaning closer to the display. Ross gave a slow nod. "Which means their center will be weaker. That's where we will hit hardest." In the hangar bays below, the atmosphere was alive with the roar of fighter engines. Magnetic clamps released one after another, and small craft shot into open space in perfect rows. Their wings caught the sunlight, flashing silver before disappearing into the black. Flight Commander Rion's voice came over the comms, calm but sharp. "All squadrons, maintain tight formation. Our job is to clear a path for the cruisers and protect our capital ships. Watch your partner, and never fly alone." As the first wave of human fighters moved forward, the core launched their own. The black shapes of their interceptors poured from hangar ports in swarms, their sharp, angular frames glinting faintly under the system's star. The space between the two forces began to close fast. On the Iron Resolve, the gunnery officers called out ranges, enemy within long-range firing distance in 30 seconds. Ross kept his voice steady. "Target their forward assault ships. Fire when ready." A second later, the deep thud of the ship's primary railguns echoed through the hull. Massive slugs of metal tore across the void at incredible speed, leaving faint trails of ionized gas. The shots slammed into the lead core ships, smashing through armor plating and sending debris spinning into space. The core returned fire immediately. Brilliant beams of plasma lanced out, striking the shields of the Iron Resolve and the ships beside it. The shields flared bright under the impact, but held firm. Smaller core craft darted between the larger vessels, firing rapid bursts from their light cannons. "All ships, advance to medium range," Ross ordered. "Cruisers, spread fire across their front line. Carriers, keep launching fighters until your hangars are empty." The space between the two fleets became a storm of light and motion. Railgun rounds, plasma bolts, and missile trails crossed in every direction. Human and core fighters tangled in twisting duels, each trying to get behind the other for a killing shot. The glow of engine trails marked sharp turns and sudden dives as pilots fought at impossible speeds. On the port side of the Iron Resolve, the destroyer Stormbreaker charged ahead of the main formation. Its captain, Dallin, pushed his ship to the limit, weaving between incoming fire to unleash a spread of torpedoes at a core heavy cruiser. The torpedoes struck in a bright chain of explosions, tearing through the enemy's side and sending the vessel drifting out of control. Stormbreakers cleared a gap, Mars said quickly. Ross's eyes narrowed, signaled the steel horizon. And Falcon's Claw pushed through that gap and hit their rear lines. The two cruisers accelerated, slipping through the hole in the core formation before it could close. Behind them, a squadron of human fighters followed, cutting down enemy interceptors that tried to block their advance. Meanwhile, on the right flank, Earth's second wing was making progress. Reports came in of several core escort ships destroyed, and one of their carriers badly damaged, but the left flank was under heavier pressure, facing more enemy ships than expected. Ross ordered the Central Fleet to send a detachment to help stabilize them. The battle was growing more intense by the minute. The void around Vendra was no longer empty black, it was filled with burning wrecks, drifting debris, and the faint flashes of escape pods firing away from crippled ships. The sun's light caught the edges of shattered hulls, casting sharp shadows across the battlefield. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, the tension was constant. Orders came and went in rapid bursts, officers relaying updates from every corner of the fleet. Ross stayed calm, adjusting the plan as the fight shifted. He knew that panic spread faster than any enemy weapon, and his crew took strength from his steady voice. Enemy flagship has not moved from center, Mara reported. They're holding it back. Ross studied the display for a moment before answering. They're waiting for us to overcome it. Keep our central force strong. When their flagship moves, we'll be ready. In the fighter battles, Rion's squadron had pushed deep into the core lines. They targeted missile frigates and communication relays, cutting into the enemy's ability to coordinate over the comms. Rion called out targets and maneuvers with sharp efficiency. His pilots responded instantly, moving as one. The core pilots were skilled and aggressive, but they underestimated the human style of combat. On Earth, pilots were trained to adapt instantly to changing conditions, to think as individuals while still working as a unit. This unpredictability made them dangerous opponents. Back on the Iron Resolve, a warning alarm sounded. Incoming. Heavy salvo from enemy flagship, a gunnery officer called. Brace for impact, Ross ordered. A cluster of massive plasma bolts streaked across the void, slamming into the forward shields of the Iron Resolve. The deck shook under the impact, lights flickering for a brief second. The shields flared bright blue, but the generators held, shields at 85%. Mara reported. Ross gave a short nod. Return fire. Target their weapon banks. Let them know we can reach them too. The forward railguns fired in unison, followed by a volley of long-range missiles. Across the battlefield, other human ships did the same, concentrating fire on the largest enemy vessels. One of the core heavy cruisers exploded under the combined assault, its hull breaking apart in a blaze of light. Still, the core fought hard. Their lines bent but did not break. The battle was far from over, and both sides knew it. But for the first time since the core arrived at Vendra, the defenders had hope. From the planet's surface, people looking up at the night sky could see flashes of light above the clouds. They did not know the details of the fight, but they could see that someone was there for them. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, Ross kept his eyes on the tactical display. The Armada had made its move, and the core had met it with force. The opening phase of the battle was ending. The real struggle, the push to break the blockade, was about to begin. The fleets of Earth had gathered at the edge of the Kavalan system. From a distance, the human warships looked like moving cities of steel, each one carrying enough power to shatter continents. Rows of massive carriers floated side by side, their hangar bays lit with blue light. Smaller escort ships patrolled, the formation like wolves guarding a pack. At the center was the Titan's Will, the largest warship humanity had ever built, and on its command deck stood Admiral Rian, his eyes fixed on the stars ahead. The message from the Kavalan people still played in his mind. Their voices had been filled with fear. They had begged Earth for help. Speaking of the endless attacks from the Vorn Empire, the Vorn had destroyed their fleets, burned their colonies, and forced survivors into hiding. For weeks, Earth had stayed silent, preparing. Now, the Armada was ready to answer. On the bridge, Commander Lura stepped beside the Admiral. "All ships report ready," she said. "The fleet is awaiting your order." Her voice was calm, but Rian could see the fire in her eyes. She had grown up on Mars and had seen firsthand what it meant when an enemy thought humans were weak. Rian turned toward the crew. "Set our course," he commanded. "The Kavalan people asked for help. We will give them more than help. We will give them freedom." His words spread through the communication channels to every ship, and thousands of human voices cheered in unison. The Armada jumped into FTL travel. Space outside the viewports twisted and blurred into streams of light. The hum of the engines was deep and steady, like the heartbeat of a giant. For 3 days, the fleet traveled through the void, and during that time, soldiers trained. Engineers checked every system, and pilots studied the battle plans. On the 4th day, they arrived. The Kavalan homeworld came into view, a green and blue planet surrounded by wreckage from old battles. Floating debris drifted slowly around the orbital paths, and beyond it, like shadows in the dark, waited the Vorn warships. There were dozens of them, shaped like jagged black spears. "Scan the enemy fleet," Lura ordered. The results came in quickly. The Vorn had fewer ships than the humans, but their weapons were powerful, and they had already set up defensive formations around the planet. Rian studied the display. "We will not give them the first strike," he said. "Form battle groups, carriers in the rear, heavy cruisers forward. Destroyers spread in a shield wall. Launch fighters when I give the signal." The human ships moved with perfect discipline. Massive engines flared, and the dark silence of space became filled with purpose. Across the battle line, crews strapped into their stations, pilots slid into their cockpits, and gunners prepared their targeting systems. The Vorn did not wait long. As the humans advanced, the enemy opened fire. Bright beams of plasma cut through the void, striking at the lead human ships. Shields flared, holding against the first wave. Rian's voice came sharp over the comms. "Return fire. No mercy." The response was overwhelming. Human cannons lit up the darkness, sending streams of energy across the battlefield. Missiles streaked through space, leaving trails of fire. The first Vorn ships shattered under the assault, breaking apart into glowing fragments in the chaos. The human fighters launched. Sleek and fast, they darted between enemy ships, targeting weak points. The Vorn tried to counter with their own interceptors, but the human pilots flew with unmatched skill. On the Titan's Will, Lura reported, "Enemy lines are breaking on the left flank. Push them," Rian ordered. "Do not give them a chance to regroup." The left side of the Vorn formation collapsed, and human ships surged forward, cutting deep into enemy ranks. The Kavalan people, watching from their battered defense stations, could hardly believe their eyes. No one had ever challenged the Vorn in such a way. But the Vorn were not defeated yet. Their flagship moved into the center of the fight, its massive guns charging for a single devastating shot. Rian saw it on the tactical display. If that weapon fired, it could destroy an entire cruiser in one strike. "Bring the Titan's main cannons online," Rian said. The crew obeyed, and the ship's enormous railguns hummed with power. The targeting systems locked onto the Vorn flagship. The enemy fired first. A blazing beam cut through space, tearing apart one of the human destroyers. Rian's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "Fire!" The Titan's cannons unleashed their fury. The first shot tore through the Vorn flagship's shields, the second smashed through its hull, and the third struck its core. The ship exploded in a silent burst of light, scattering debris into the void. The destruction of their flagship broke the enemy's will. The remaining Vorn ships tried to flee, but the humans chased them down. disabling some and destroying others. Within hours, the Kavalan skies were clear. On the surface of the planet, the people cheered as the human fleet appeared overhead. They had expected help, but they had not expected to see the enemy crushed so completely. Rian stood on the bridge, watching the Kavalan homeworld turn slowly below. He knew the war was far from over. The Vorn Empire would send more fleets, and the fight would spread to other systems. But today, they had won. Today, humanity had shown what it meant to be a Deathworlder. The Admiral gave a single order. Send word to Earth. The Kavalan people are safe, for now. The fleet began to regroup, their ships still glowing from battle, somewhere in the darkness. Beyond, the Vorn were already planning their revenge, but the humans were ready. They would fight again and again until no one in the galaxy doubted their resolve. After the fierce battle that freed the Kavalan system, the Earth Armada sailed through quiet space. The stars seemed calm, but Admiral Rian knew this peace would not last long. The Vorn Empire was powerful, and it would not give up so easily. Deep in the shadows beyond the known systems, the enemy was already gathering new forces on the command bridge of the Titan's will. Rian stood looking at the fleet's status screens. The ships were tired but ready. Repairs were underway on damaged vessels, and supplies were being restocked. The medics treated wounded crew members, their faces showing relief that more had survived than expected. Captain Lura approached Rian with a report. Our scouts have detected increased Vorn activity near the nearby system of Helmaris. They are building a fleet. It looks much larger than before. Rian frowned. They are preparing a counterattack. We cannot let them strike first. He turned to his officers. We will not wait for the enemy to choose the battlefield. We strike first and keep them on the defensive. Gather the captains. We leave in 2 hours. The fleet's mood shifted from rest to action. Crews ready weapons, pilots trained in simulators, and engineers ran final checks. The Titans will hum with power as systems were brought back to full strength. In the briefing room, Rian laid out the plan. The Vorn will expect us to attack their main fleet head-on. Instead, we will use a smaller strike force to hit their shipyards and supply lines. The rest of the Armada will hold position to defend Kavalan. Commander Lura nodded. A surprise attack will disrupt their preparations and slow their advance. Rian looked at each officer. This mission will be dangerous. We will fly deep into enemy territory with limited support, but it is the best chance to turn the tide in this war. The captains accepted the challenge. The crew of the strike group boarded their ships, knowing they might not return quickly. The small fleet jumped into faster-than-light travel toward Helmaris. As the ships exited hyperspace, they saw the Vorn's hidden base. Massive shipyards and fuel depots surrounded a rocky moon. Hundreds of vessels were docked or under construction. The enemy had worked fast to rebuild their power. The human ships moved quietly, avoiding enemy sensors. Scouts flew ahead, marking patrol routes and defense towers. Commander Lura coordinated the attack teams. Target the fuel depots first, she ordered. Without fuel, their fleet cannot move. Missile launchers on human cruisers loaded with powerful warheads. With precision timing, they fired in waves. Explosions rocked the enemy base, fire spreading quickly. Communications towers went dark. The Vorn scrambled to respond. Fighter squadrons swarmed out to defend the shipyards. Battleships turned their weapons toward the human ships. The battle erupted suddenly. Human fighters fought fiercely, their quick maneuvers and teamwork matching the experienced Vorn pilots. The small strike fleet took heavy fire, but they pressed on. On the Titan's will, Rian coordinated attacks. Keep pressure on the repair yards, disable the launch bays, cut off reinforcements. The crew worked fast, knowing every second mattered. Enemy ships exploded or retreated, but the fight was far from over. Suddenly, the Vorn launched a counterattack from behind. A hidden fleet appeared from a nearby system, aiming to trap the human strike force. Rian's heart pounded. They set a trap. Fall back to the jump point. The human ships reversed course under heavy fire. Fighters covered the retreat, engaging enemy ships to slow their advance. Damage reports filled the comms channels. Some ships were hit badly, and crews worked quickly to save them. The fleet reached the jump point just as enemy ships closed in. The Titans will power up its engines for the jump. Jump drive charging. 3, 2, 1. A bright flash and the fleet disappeared, leaving the enemy behind. Back at Kavalan, the fleet gathered once more. The attack slowed the Vorn's plans but cost precious ships and lives. Rion stood before his crew. We fought well and hurt the enemy, but this war will not end soon. We must be ready for whatever comes next. The people of Kavalan watched the stars with hope renewed. Earth's Deathworlders had shown their strength not just in defense, but in courage and sacrifice. And across the galaxy, word spread, when humanity fought, they fought to win. The time had come. The Vorn Empire had gathered its might once again, determined to crush the Earth Armada and reclaim the Kavalan system across the stars. The human fleet prepared for the battle that would decide the fate of many worlds. On the bridge of the Titans, Admiral Rion stood firm. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with determination. The crews of the fleet moved quickly but with focus, knowing what was at stake. Enemy fleet detected, the sensor officer announced. They are larger and better armed than before. Rion nodded. We expected this. Prepare for full engagement. All ships to battle stations. Captain Lura joined him. Our forces are spread thinner. After the strike at Halmaris, we will need to rely on tactics and teamwork more than firepower. Rion gave a small smile. That is what makes us different. The Vorn rely on strength and numbers. We rely on our will. The fleet formed a defensive perimeter around Kavalan. Shields raised and weapons ready. From the surface, the people watched. The dark sky, seeing the flashes of light as the first shots were fired. The Vorn fleet advanced, their warships moving like shadows over the planet. Energy beams and missiles streaked through space, lighting the darkness. The battle was brutal. Ships collided, shields flickered, and explosions rocked the void. Human fighters darted through enemy formations, attacking with precision and courage. Rion directed his fleet with calm authority. Focus fire on the enemy's command ships. Without their leadership, their forces will falter. The Titans will, and its allies fired their heaviest weapons, striking the largest enemy vessels. One by one, the Vorn command ships were disabled or destroyed, but the Vorn fought fiercely. They launched suicide attacks, desperate missiles, and powerful energy blasts. Many human ships were hit, and cries of pain echoed through the fleets. Communications. On the bridge, Lura worked beside Rion, coordinating damage control teams and medical units. We are losing ships, but the enemy losses are greater. Rion nodded. We must hold the line. The turning point came when Earth's fighter squadrons launched a massive coordinated strike. They overwhelmed the remaining Vorn fighters, clearing the way for human cruisers to break through, with enemy fighters down. The human ships closed in on the Vorn flagship. It was massive and covered in armor, but the combined firepower of the Armada was unstoppable. A final blast tore through the flagship's core. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash, its destruction sending shockwaves through the enemy fleet. Without their leader, the Vorn forces began to retreat. The humans pursued, but Rion called them back. Let them go. We have won this battle, but the war is not over. The fleet regrouped. Battered but victorious, cheers rang through the communication channels. The people of Kavalan celebrated, knowing their freedom had been secured. Admiral Rion looked at the stars and thought of Earth, a planet of harsh beauty and fierce defenders. He knew this victory was a message to the galaxy. Humanity would stand strong. They would protect their allies, and they would fight as Deathworlders do, with unyielding spirit.